Thanksgiving is a time for family, food, and backyard football. Happy memories with cousins and friends, but not anymore for me. Here's my story. I'm from Ohio. My dad worked on the Chevrolet S10 pickup truck assembly line in Dayton, so this story was in 1987. I was 12 years old. This memory is the opposite of happy times and the aroma of an 18-pound turkey roasting in Grandma's oven. Grandma and Grandpa lived in Kentucky near Corbin, a straight shot down Interstate 75 from Dayton. You probably know Corbin as the first Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant. It is where Colonel Sanders is from. We always went down to Corbin for Thanksgiving. My 2 aunts and 2 uncles also brought their families, so there were a bunch of us cousins. Grandpa's house had a huge backyard that backed up to a creek and a forest beyond. He kept it mowed, and before Thanksgiving, he always had the leaves gathered in a sweeper he pulled behind his lawn tractor. It was perfect for touch football. However, we were often more physical than touch. It was just the way we were between cousins. It was a blast playing with my cousins, and we played until dark or whenever Grandpa rang the triangle, calling us in for the Thanksgiving feast. On this Thanksgiving, when Grandpa rang the triangle, my idiot cousin Billy Joe punted the football into the forest across the creek. I was the closest to the stepping stones, so Grandpa yelled to me to fetch the ball and hurry in for dinner. It's getting dark. That was totally unfair because I hadn't eaten all day, waiting for turkey, and was starved. I wasn't the blockhead who kicked it into the forest on purpose in the first place. But I had no choice. When Grandpa said go get it, there was no other option, and I dared not challenge him. So I jumped stone to stone across the creek, which was way low anyhow, and took the path into the woods. I looked for it everywhere, in the underbrush and behind trees, and I was still looking for it. It was getting dark quickly, and I was pretty deep into the woods and super hungry, so I turned around to run back to the house. As I turned, I kicked something that caused me to stumble and fall. It wasn't hard like a rock, but squished like a rotten pumpkin. "What the heck?" I said out loud. I crawled back to see what it was in the darkening forest. I came face to face with the corpse of a man. His mouth was wide open, and his gooey eyes looking up in one and down in the other. It was like a prop from a haunted house, except it stunk of decaying flesh. I gagged but couldn't turn away as my eyes were locked on the half-flesh, half-skeletal face. I'll never forget the shock that shot through my body. I still see that rotting corpse and his hideous face in my nightmares, chasing me back to the house where Thanksgiving dinner was being placed on the table. I ran inside screaming and out of breath. "There's a dead body in the woods!" My dad, his brothers, and Grandpa all grabbed flashlights, and I led them back to the body. Grandma called the police, and in 20 minutes, a coroner's unit and K9 dogs along with the police were searching the area. I was still telling the police officer how I found the body and overheard the coroner say the man had been dead at least a week by the decomposition. He described the deceased as having multiple knife wounds to the torso, and it was clearly a murder. He had yet to determine if the crime was committed where the body was found or if it had been dumped in the woods later. 2 hours later, the family returned to the Thanksgiving table, but no one wanted to celebrate. For me, all the food was tasteless. All I could smell was the decaying flesh of the dead man. The turkey, after it was cut, looked too much like the skeletal skull for me to bear. I had to excuse myself. Needless to say, it was the scariest Thanksgiving ever. Every year, my parents hosted Thanksgiving at our house in Atlanta. When I was 18, I was accepted to the University of South Carolina in Columbia, and my parents, now free from children at home, moved to Hilton Head, South Carolina. My dad was a golfer, and that was his retirement dream. My mom had no intentions of not hosting Thanksgiving, and I had no intentions of missing Thanksgiving with Mom and Dad, even though it was a new place in a new location. Thanksgiving was all about family. It was a 2.5-hour drive from the university to Hilton Head, so I started early on Thanksgiving Day, taking Interstate 26 south from Columbia. When I got to the junction of Interstate 95, an hour after departure from my shared apartment, I had to pee so badly that I took an exit for a service center and thought I'd get gas as I used the toilet. I drove up to a free pump, hurriedly swiped my card and placed the pump into the gas tank and ran into the center, about to burst. Mercifully, the public restroom was open. Feeling much relieved and enjoying the beautiful sunny day, I went back to my car, which was topped up. I was so looking forward to seeing Mom and Dad. It had been 3 months apart, and I wasn't accustomed to that yet. I was in high spirits in anticipation of Mom's turkey dinner. Before I could get the pump handle returned to the pump and into my car, an ordinary-looking man approached me. I was surprised, but not alarmed by his appearance. He was just an average-looking guy with a forced smile. His hair was untrimmed and looked like it needed washing. Still, he wasn't looking like a mess or anything, certainly not homeless. He politely addressed me with, "Sorry to bother you, but do you have a few bucks you could spare for gas?" He pointed to an older car and continued, "I've run out of gas and I've left my wallet at home." In the back seat, there was a little girl staring at me through the window. He said, "I have my daughter with me and we have no money for Thanksgiving. Anything you can give would be of help." He took hold of my arm, not aggressively but kind of gently, and started to walk me over to his car, ostensibly to introduce his daughter to me. He kept saying whatever money you have would be greatly appreciated. He was definitely pulling at my heartstrings, especially with the sad little girl watching me desperately from the car. It was Thanksgiving, and everyone deserves to enjoy a turkey dinner. But when he touched my arm, something in me flashed alarm. I've always had an excellent instinct about people I've just met, and this guy's aura was very cloudy and unreadable. It was as if an evil energy was beneath that forced smile of his. Everything in me said to get as far away from this man as fast as possible. I abruptly stopped and pulled from his grip saying, "I'm sorry, I haven't any cash on me. I'm sorry I can't help you and your daughter. I'm very late." I turned back and ran to my car and drove off as quickly as I could. As I sped out of the service center, I saw the man watching me angrily, clenching his fists. I gagged at the thought that the man was holding my arm. I was happy to be away and back on the highway. Still, as I drove, I also felt guilty that I was unable to provide a little girl a Thanksgiving dinner, even if her dad was a creep. When I arrived at my parents' new place on Hilton Head, the dinner preparations were in full swing. Mom had made cinnamon rolls that filled the house with warmth, and the turkey, still in the oven, was aromatic with herbs and fruits. On the stove were mashed potatoes, gravy, and cranberry sauce. I instantly forgot to tell the story of the man and his daughter at the gas station whom I felt sorry for. Later that night, we watched football and the 10 o'clock news. Mom and I chat and laugh, and Dad is half asleep in his lazy boy. We were all happy to be together. I was so full I could never have driven back to Columbia. I was grateful that Mom had made up the guest room. As the news anchor spoke, I caught the words of a serial killer who had been spotted at a gas station on I-95. I looked up from my conversation with Mom and looked straight into the face of the picture of the man who had taken my arm at the gas station earlier in the day. The news played surveillance footage from the gas station of an unknown girl with the killer walking her by her arm to a stolen car with a kidnapped girl named Amy. I shouted, "That's me!" My mom and dad both looked and saw that it was indeed me in the killer's grip. The anchor reported that this man was considered to be armed and dangerous and was wanted for multiple murders in South Carolina and Georgia. His method of operation was to lure a young woman with a story of needing help. He has a 9-year-old kidnapped girl he is using to convince other girls to assist him. The young woman in the surveillance recording was lucky to escape. Not everyone has been so fortunate. Be careful until he is apprehended. Cold sweats raked my body, and flashes of the man's face ransacked my consciousness. I could feel his grip on my arm, and I cried. I had come so close to a horrible death. I cried for the little girl who stared at me for help. Both Mom and Dad hugged me, and this Thanksgiving, we were grateful we were still together. I come from a very devout family, or at least my father is. So our family gets a lot of Christian lessons, and Thanksgiving is a great time to show gratitude. My father's lesson on one Thanksgiving? But gratitude doesn't always reciprocate, is what we discovered. Here is my frightening Thanksgiving story. I was 15 and we were living in Nashville, Tennessee. We are an average American family of mom and dad and 2 girls. I am the older. My sister was 13 at the time. Grandma and Grandpa lived 35 minutes out of town on the farm my dad grew up on. This Thanksgiving, my dad had gone to the farm to pick up Grandma and Grandpa. On the way home, they stopped at a gas station to fill the tank so he could drive them home and return after Thanksgiving dinner. While pumping gas, he saw a man clearly down on his luck sitting at a table in the subway next to the gas station. He immediately saw an opportunity to be a good Christian and invited the man over to our Thanksgiving dinner. When they arrived, I was setting the table. The man looked homeless and wore a dirty Carhartt coat and worn-out work pants. He hadn't shaved in a week, and by his smell, he hadn't bathed either. Dad introduced him as Edvard. Edvard didn't look at us nor extend his hand. He said nothing, shuffling over to the Thanksgiving table and sat at the nearest seat. My brother and I exchanged surprised and uncomfortable glances at each other. Mom shook her head and entered the kitchen to take the turkey out of the oven. While Dad sliced the turkey, he told us how he had seen Edvard sitting alone on Thanksgiving with only a cup of coffee at the gas station. It was for us, a Christian family, to do the right thing and bring him in from the cold on this special night. I could tell Mom wasn't happy with this, but she said nothing and handed the green bean casserole for me to carry to the table. I was worried I'd have to sit next to him, but Grandpa took my usual seat, which was next to the guy. I sat across from him, and I could still smell him, even with the aroma of food at the table. What was going through Dad's mind when he invited this disgusting man to Thanksgiving dinner? When all the food was on the table and everyone was seated, we bowed our heads and took a hand with our family to pray. Edvard sat still, not taking hands, his eyes bulging at the food before him. After Dad gave the prayer, we started to eat, and Dad tried to start a conversation with Edvard. But that was pointless. Edvard already had his face in the food and was licking his hands. It was pure gross. It wasn't enjoyable to watch, so I tried to look away, but he was directly across from me. After an excruciatingly long dinner, Edvard stood up and said, "I gotta pee." My dad got up and showed him to the hall powder room and returned to his seat to all of our stares and whispered questions. "What on earth were you thinking?" Dad whispered just loud enough for the table to hear. I felt sorry for him and wanted to do the right thing. Mom was more direct. "How are we going to get him out of here?" The whispered conversation went on for a while until my sister asked, "Where is he? Is he still in the toilet?" Dad looked at his watch, got up and went to the powder room where he had left him, but it was empty. He started walking around the house saying, "Edvard, you here?" He checked the whole house and returned to the dining room, reporting that Edvard had vanished. "It appears our guest has left. Looks like he slipped out through the bathroom window." We all agreed that it wasn't a good idea for Dad to have brought a potentially dangerous man into our house. Mom served the pumpkin and apple pies warm with ice cream on top. We were all buzzing with the strange Thanksgiving dinner. Indeed, it is not one to be forgotten soon. After dinner, Dad drove Grandma and Grandpa home, and when he came back, he saw me and my sister off to bed. He and Mom watched the evening news in the den while my sister and I played music on our TV as we prepared for bed. Once in bed, I switched off the TV with the remote and the room fell silent. After a few minutes, my sister said, "What is that sound you're making?" I said, "I'm not making any sound. Go to sleep." But then I heard it too. It was heavy breathing, and it was coming from under my bed. Then there was a bump, and my mattress popped up. I screamed, and my sister screamed, and together we bolted for the door. Dad heard our terror and came running. We met him in the hall, crying someone was under the bed. At that moment, Edvard stepped out of our bedroom and, not saying a word, walked to the front door and left. It was a terrifying Thanksgiving, and my dad was the one who learned the lesson that night.
Subscribe.